It wasn't a comedy sketch, but a public lashing dressed in wit. Graham Norton, Britain's razor-sharp talk show icon and cultural commentator, stunned audiences recently when he stepped out of his usual charm-and-chuckle mode and unleashed scathing fury on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. On a BBC radio interview and later echoed during a podcast appearance, Norton tore into the Sussexes' hypocritical privacy crusade, denounced their phony Hollywood lifestyle, and slammed their exploitative use of personal trauma for selfish public relations gains. And in doing so, he gave voice to a growing global fatigue with the Sussex soap opera, a drama that's long stopped being entertaining and now reeks of narcissism, manipulation, and strategic victimhood. Norton's critique wasn't the typical tabloid chatter. This was a respected British media figure with a reputation for wit and fairness, finally saying what many have whispered for years, that Harry and Meghan have turned pain into profit, victimhood into a brand, and love into leverage. They say they want privacy, Norton quipped, and yet somehow they're never out of the spotlight. I don't know if they're confused or just confusing the rest of us. The remark wasn't just biting, it was devastating in its clarity. It cut through the fog of spin and PR gloss and revealed the naked truth about the Sussex saga. It's less about liberation and more about leverage. Let's take a closer look at the phony lifestyle Norton eviscerated. Since abandoning their royal duties in 2020, Harry and Meghan have settled into a Montecito mansion worth a reported $14.7 million, funded in part by lucrative deals with Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House. Contracts not built on talent or innovation, but on exploiting the Sussex name and smearing the very institution that gave them status. They railed against the media for invading their privacy, then sat down with Oprah for a 2-hour tell-all broadcast to 17 million people. They denounced the royal family as racist and emotionally abusive, yet used their titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex on every commercial project to cash in. This dissonance is precisely what Norton called out. There's a disconnect, he noted. They say one thing and do another. And at some point, you stop listening, not because you don't care, but because it doesn't feel real anymore. And there's the heart of the matter: the world has stopped buying what Harry and Meghan are selling. The Sussexes aren't victims, they're venture capitalists of misery, turning every grievance into a PR campaign, every feud into content, and every personal conflict into currency. Norton's rebuke wasn't isolated either, it reflects a wider cultural backlash. Their Spotify deal, once valued at $20 million, was unceremoniously cancelled after Meghan's Archetypes podcast failed to deliver meaningful engagement or originality. Even Spotify executives, speaking anonymously, described the couple as grifters, who lacked creative consistency and follow-through. Their Netflix series, a 6-part docuseries aimed at telling their truth, was panned by critics for being one-dimensional, self-indulgent, and devoid of substance. And Spare, Harry's ghostwritten memoir, read more like a diary of grievances than a royal retrospective. What's more, the Sussexes' toxic PR strategy, using royal drama as a ladder while simultaneously kicking the monarchy at every opportunity, has alienated not just the public, but celebrities, professionals, and even liberal allies. Figures like Jon Stewart, Bill Maher, and even Stephen Colbert, hosts once sympathetic to their progressive plight, have made sharp jabs at the couple's hypocrisy. These aren't fringe voices. These are cultural titans turning against two people who once held the world's sympathy in their palms and squandered it with arrogance and overexposure. Meghan in particular has drawn fire for what many perceive as a calculated, self-serving persona. Once hailed as a symbol of modernity within the royal family, she has devolved into a figure increasingly mocked for her obsession with optics, her tone-deaf compassion campaigns, and her relentless pursuit of fame dressed up as activism. Whether it's trademarking the word archetypes for a podcast, wearing $2,000 outfits to visit impoverished schools, or pushing a children's book based on royal privilege while lecturing others about equality, Meghan's actions betray a glaring contradiction between message and method. And Graham Norton called it perfectly. There's something performative about it all, he said. They've turned sincerity into strategy. The statement landed like a hammer. Because that's precisely what Meghan and Harry have done. They've converted personal trauma into brand equity, monetized family rifts, and curated a messiah complex that masks ruthless ambition. The tragedy isn't that they left the royal family. It's that they torched the bridge, then sold photos of the fire to Netflix. What's even more egregious is their treatment of those they left behind. Harry's repeated attacks on his father King Charles and brother Prince William have gone from therapeutic venting to outright sabotage. Meghan's veiled accusations during the Oprah interview suggesting racist undertones within the royal family without naming names caused irreparable damage to the institution and strained Britain's international reputation. And yet, the couple continues to cling to their titles while denigrating the source of those very titles, a contradiction Graham Norton couldn't ignore. In another segment of the podcast, Norton added, "It's not just about what you say. It's about what you do and whether those two things match up. For the Sussexes, they rarely do. They champion climate change while flying private jets. They preach feminism while Meghan remains silent on women's rights in Iran and Afghanistan. They advocate for mental health, but weaponize their own issues as smokescreens for dodging accountability. And perhaps the greatest irony of all, in seeking independence and authenticity, Harry and Meghan have become more scripted and artificial than any royal protocol ever demanded. At least Buckingham Palace knew how to keep its drama behind closed doors. The Sussexes broadcast theirs in high definition, with commercial breaks and Netflix logos. Graham Norton's takedown is a cultural moment, a shift in tone from tolerance to tiredness. The British public, once cautiously supportive of the Sussexes' decision to step back, now view them as opportunists. And Americans, initially enchanted by the rebellious royals, are beginning to see through the fog of curated content and designer compassion. When even seasoned entertainers like Norton, who has welcomed both Meghan and Harry's relatives onto his couch, break their silence, it signals a sea change in public patience. The Sussex narrative is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. They can no longer play the victims while living like victors. They can't denounce media while weaponizing it. They can't cry foul about family dysfunction while broadcasting private therapy sessions to millions. Graham Norton simply said what millions have long felt, that the couple's public image is less about truth and more about transaction. And as the applause fades, the cameras dim, and the Spotify checks stop arriving, Harry and Meghan must confront a sobering truth. You can't manufacture authenticity. Eventually, people see through the act. And when Britain's most beloved talk show host steps out of character to hold you accountable, the performance may finally be over.